Well, this is a treat for me this week. Thank you for joining us. You know, sometimes you can just tell almost immediately when you meet someone that there's just something different about that person. That is the case. That was the case with our guest this week. I mean, you could tell he was smart, but not because he wanted to tell you how smart he was. He was usually either the last to speak or towards the last. And you know what it's like when you're around a bunch of politicians. They can't wait to give you their perspective, their opinion. But this guy usually went last. And then what he said made the most sense. So it's really no surprise that he was kind of plucked out of the house to do two of the more important jobs our country has. And he probably is too modest to say this. I'm convinced he passed up an almost sure thing in the U.S. Senate. So he's an unusual guy. His name is Mike Pompeo, and he is, we're going to talk about some of the other things he is. The most recent thing he is an incredibly successful author of a new book, Never Give an Inch, Fighting for the America I Love. With that, Secretary, you got 1,000 titles. So let's go with Secretary Mike Pompeo. How are you?
Trey, I'm good. Let's go with Mike. We're too good of friends to do anything different from that.
I know, but this is what I say to my doctor friends. It took you about 12 years to get the title doctor. I'm not going to dismiss that by calling you by your first name on the golf course. I mean, God knows how long it took you to become the Secretary of the State. I want to ask you, and this is going to be weird, and you do touch on it in your book. And actually, I mean, I care about your professional accomplishments. I'm more interested in how people became what they are and how they got where they are. You touch upon your upbringing in your book. You write some very, I thought, warm stories. So here's my question. Tell us what a young Mike Pompeo was like.
Oh, Trey, it was, so I grew up in Santa Ana, California, in Orange County. Orange County, California was different than it is today. It was a great place. My parents, my father worked at a company that made fasteners, nuts and bolts. My mother stayed at home for most of our upbringing, but when I went to high school, she went to work in a manufacturing company too. Neither of them graduated from college, but man, they were determined we were going to have lives of hard work and commitment. They were tough in that way, but loving too. I have an older sister, younger brother, about a year and a half apart. And we were taught, you better study hard, you better work hard. And if you do those things, good things will happen most days. I was a high school basketball player, all of 5'10", 5'11". I was a power forward. I wasn't very good, but I enjoyed the heck out of that too.
All right. So if you can get in West Point, you can get in almost any other school too. So why West Point? Was that like always what you wanted to do? I mean, you could have probably gone wherever you wanted to.
It was a pretty simple upbringing. My backup school was the University of California, Irvine. I was stay at home and I wanted to be an engineer. So I was looking at schools that had good engineering programs and then kind of stumbled onto West Point. I'd watched Army Navy games with my dad, but it wasn't something I had dreamed of all my life. But the more I learned, just looked like a place where a kid could get a chance, right? I was a good student, and I thought, boy, if I go there and work hard, maybe I can do okay there too. And it turned out it was every bit of that. It taught me an awful lot about how to listen and how to learn and a little bit about how to lead as well.
Now, I had some guys in my high school that were there when you were there, and legend has it, I didn't know they ranked. I mean, I figure if you're at West Point or Annapolis, everybody is like equally smart, so there's no sense in ranking them. They keep trying to tell me you finished like either at the top of the class or near the top of the class. So this is like doing really well among nothing but smart people.
You know, Trey, it's funny. I'll be introduced to different things. They'll say, Mike Pompeo graduated first in his class. And if any of your buddies were there, they would roll their eyes and say, for goodness gracious, you've been riding that horse 40 years now, Mike. Get on with it. Stop the madness. It was a great place where I made my lifetime friends who have been around me now coming on 4 decades. And I had this incredible chance to serve in the Army following that with some great young soldiers. And I wouldn't trade those moments for the world.
All right. One part of your book that I almost laughed out loud. So when I think of you, I mean, not only did you graduate West Point, successful businessman, member of the House, plucked out of the House to be the CIA director, you wow your boss and your colleagues there, so they pick you to be Secretary of the State. And yet I'm reading about a Mike Pompeo that at one point in life was impatient, that he didn't think he was doing enough quick enough. And I can't reconcile those two. I mean, any one of the jobs you've had, for people, that would be a crowning achievement in life. I mean, I can think of 4 things you've done that people would say, okay, that's the pinnacle of life. And yet you were impatient. You didn't think you were moving quickly enough.
I don't know that it was all of that. It's always been the case that I appreciated how much the Lord had given me and how lucky I was to be here. And I'd caught a lot of breaks in my life, some of which happened because you're there and working hard, but a lot of which, you know this, Trey, just right time and the Lord striking. I mean, who dreams that I'm going to get to serve on the Benghazi committee with you and spend more time with you for a year or so than I did with my wife, for goodness sake. Right? All of these things.
That was penance. That was punishment, Mike. That was not a reward.
All of these things accumulate, right, Trey? You from the simple things in your life to the fact that I came across Susan and married her, they all just kind of build, and I've been pretty blessed. And so if there was impatience, it was a desire to kind of, how do you find a place where you can give back and serve and do good? Not just for America in the highest sense, but for Nick, our son, for your family, for your community, your church, all of those things. It's always been an important part of my life.
All right. Your modesty will probably deflect from this. You will remember it differently from the way I remember it. I could have sworn they really, really, really wanted you to run for the United States Senate in Kansas. I maybe I'm wrong about that, but I could have sworn they really, really wanted you to do it. And you were getting a lot of pressure to do it. And yet that's not what you opted to do for yourself. Most people don't turn that down.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to say it would have been a competitive primary. There are no guarantees. I know you're going to say all that stuff, but let's just assume I'm right and that it was a pretty clear path to U.S. Senate. Yet you saw something different for your life. How did you go about giving it analysis, but ultimately concluding it wasn't right for you?
Sure, this will make sense for you. By the way, no, I would have crushed it in Kansas. Nobody would have challenged me. I would have walked away with it. It would have been a layup. We've all been around too long to know that's not true. In the end, I had another year and a half. I was hoping maybe President Trump would get reelected even more. And I was America's Secretary of State. Who gets to do that? I'd been in Congress, Trey. You've experienced this too. I felt like I had sort of done the things that I could do there. And so when you get this chance to be on the world stage trying to deliver the American people, to walk away from that, when there was lots of pressure to do so, people saying, get out, your reputation is intact, go. It just didn't make any sense for Susan and me. It's too bad. It would have given us a chance to be back home, go back to Kansas, but we ultimately decided that the right place for us was to stay, finish out our time as Secretary of State until President Trump fired me.
Well, P.S., that never happened. The firing part never happened. All right. To the naked eye, being the CIA director and being the Secretary of State require vastly different skill sets. And yet you did both. So did you enjoy one job more than the other? Did one require more, I don't want to say learning, but I mean, you served on the House Intelligence Committee. So I'm assuming CIA thing came not terribly difficult for you. Contrast those two jobs, and especially in light of the title of your book, Loving America is one thing. Never giving an inch. Most diplomats would not say never give an inch. So work all that in for me.
I'll do my best. Very different jobs for sure. Very different institutions, organizations for sure. The CIA felt good to me. It felt normal. I kind of knew that. I was comfortable there. A lot of veterans, folks who'd served in the military, go to work as CIA officers. You're not in public. You get to fly around the world, and there's no media traveling with you. It is a very internally focused mission set, and there's a lot of clarity. You're the facts and data guy. Just deliver good intelligence for the president and for the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State so they can make the tough decisions in the heat of the moment. So that was really fun. You get to watch all the cool stuff, all the spy movie stuff. You go, wow, that's actually true. So that piece of it was just absolutely lovely. And it was an institution that sort of fit me like a glove. And so I was happier than heck there. And then the president said, I got another idea. State Department was very different, deeply public, Trey, not something that I relish doing combat with the media. They were all over us. You travel in an airplane where there's 15 media folks in the back of the airplane, for goodness sake. But second, it was an institution of such scale and scope and 3 unions and so far left of center that getting it to conform to what President Trump and I were trying to do was really, really, really hard. We were trying to break some glass, Trey. The foreign policy establishment, it's not even left or right. It's not political. It's just they have this thesis, this consensus, this inertia. And we were different cast of characters, to be sure. And so that was a tough leadership challenge as well.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.